Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to another GMAT session. Today we have a debrief of Abhijay's journey to GMAT 760. So before we get started, Abhijay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. My name is Abhijay, and I've been on GMAT Club active since 2016. I did my bachelor's and master's from IIIT in Bangalore, and I graduated in 2017. I worked for two years in Malaysia, and I spent 2 years working in Paris. And currently, I'm based working as a product manager with a construction technology firm based in Switzerland, very close to Zurich. Very happy to be here and talk about my journey to GMAT 760 and also then admit to Harvard Business School.
Yeah, I know. Congratulations about that. We will talk about that as well. So let's get right to it. Asking what is on everyone's mind. How did you do it? Tell us about your strategy.
Sure. So as I said, my journey to a score of 760 has been quite long because I started off not knowing anything. It was very new when I got introduced to GMAT Club, and back then my strategy, I will talk about it in two legs. So let's talk about the first leg when I took my first attempt at the GMAT. And then I was just looking at all the materials out there, and I was kind of overwhelmed just because of so many resources which were there out there. So I enrolled in the course, and that didn't work out the best for me. And what I was more focusing on was just solving a lot of questions from the official guide. But then over the years, when I found that I had to change my strategy, I just focused on the official questions, and then I was spending time on just quality, right? Just solving fewer questions and spending more time. So that was a change which I did, and that worked out for me. Of course, it was a culmination of different factors. I also attended different webinars on GMAT Club, also interacted with like different courses, had a look at them, also used some guides from Manhattan. But I think overall it was a culmination of all factors. But the big change was just having this mindset of solving fewer questions and trying to learn the maximum I can from these questions. And I think that was a turning point in my GMAT prep journey.
So what was the inclination or the thing that made you realize that you've reached the maximum amount of questions already? Like what's making you realize that you've plateaued in your scores in GMAT?
Yes, so I remember. So from my first attempt on my GMAT, I scored a 710. It was a Q49 and a V38, and I realized that even if I practice, the more I practice, I'm not able to improve my score. I had seen most of the questions on which were existing in the official guide, at least I think it was 2018 or 17 edition back then, and I felt like I knew the answers. Like if I saw a question, oh, I've seen this question. But what I didn't realize was that there is so much to learn from that question. And I felt like the mocks which I took were almost stagnant. Like I was not able to improve my score how much ever I tried. So I tried I thought maybe it's lacking in the resources I have. So I started searching for more resources. For example, somebody suggested LSAT questions and all sort of stuff which existed, or trying to solve extremely hard questions like the 95% ones which you see on GMAT Club. So I realized that nothing was helping me out at that stage, and I needed to really change something fundamentally in the way I think about this exam.
Okay, that's good. So what are some of the common pitfalls that you think you needed to avoid?
Yeah, so I would say one thing is just don't get overwhelmed by the number of resources out there, and don't focus on solving many questions, right? I mean, my earlier mindset was, okay, today I'm going to solve critical reasoning, so I have to solve 50 questions in this one day, right? And there was a sense of satisfaction after having solved 50 questions. But the idea is not to fall for those 50 questions, but just say, let's say pick 10 questions, and for each question that you solve, you have 5 options, and you should not be able to just tell which is the right answer, but for each of the other wrong answers, you should know why these are wrong. And the best way, I think, is to start putting comments on GMAT Club where you have these discussions so that others can also see how you're thinking. or have a buddy with you to exchange these ideas, because I think that's where the learning comes from. Just spending a lot of time on the questions, because a lot of times when I have students who come to me for GMAT tutoring, they would always say, okay, I need to improve by 200 points in 1 week, can you help me? That's the standard question always. And I think that's a very wrong mindset to have towards this exam, because this exam is testing certain fundamental concepts which need time to be built. And this time to be built and this getting proficient at solving questions comes by spending time with these questions, just the same questions which you see, but spending like more time and just solving a limited good quality questions, which are of course the official guide questions.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned it's really about the quality, right? The quality and how you get there, right? So strategies for retakes. Any
Sure.
strategy when you're retaking?
Sure. So the first thing you should always, I would say, is when you want to retake the test, is to order an ESR, right? Like your enhanced score report. I'm not sure if it's available for the online. I think it should be. And order this enhanced score analysis, because it will tell you where exactly you faltered in the test, right? Because that shows a lot of insights. For example, did you run out of time? Or was it that you couldn't answer the harder difficulty questions? Or was it just one subsection score that tanked your entire score down? So that was very important for me. And then you make a very focused plan from that ESR, that, okay, so I did not do well on the sentence correction portion of this exam, and I would want to now focus, let's say, the next 15 days on it, and then move on to the critical reasoning, bold face questions. So very specific things to improve your score. I think that is something which you should always have in mind. The second tip I would have is doing a lot of mocks, right? I mean, this may be a little bit, let's say, not a very popular opinion, but I think taking a lot of mocks helps, because it builds that stamina of seeing that blue screen all the time, like multiple times. You're adjusted to it, and you're like, when you're going for the exam, it's just another day. So I would say take a lot of mocks and always try to be plus or minus 10 points within your score range. So if you hit that milestone, that the 3 mocks you took are within plus minus 10 of your exam range, I think it's a good time. Then you can schedule your retake.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good tip, right? Knowing when to actually know that you're ready to schedule your retakes. Yeah. Did you use any like other resources? Could you list them, name them, the ones that helped you the most?
Sure. So I can say a few things which helped me. I think the old Manhattan guides were pretty helpful. Like the fifth edition or sixth edition for sentence correction was super helpful in the verbal section. And the critical reasoning Bible for the Power Score Bible for critical reasoning, I think that was very helpful as well. I mean, that was something I felt quite helped me a lot. For quant, I would say nothing specific as such, but I think Target Test Prep has a very good guide of all the, like a cheat sheet, which is a good starter. But other than that, I'm also happy to talk about a page and a channel which I started called GMAT with Abhijay, where I'm helping students talk about like my journey, and have like put all these learnings together, what I have learned through different resources in 3 years, in jam-packed just 15 sessions of verbal. So I would cover the entire verbal section in just 15 sessions. I think that is really something which I feel is the most essential thing which I can help with. But apart from that, I think GMAT Club is a great resource for questions in general, right? So because it makes an error log for you. So you don't need to have an error log per se, but go to GMAT Club and then find the question and solve it timed in a timed manner, and then and revisit the questions which you make wrong. So I think these are some of the few things which I would recommend.
Okay. We have a question from the comment. It says from Rahul, what was your weakest stubborn area in GMAT and how did you tackle it? I think that's a good question.
What was my weakest weakest? I would say RC, reading comprehension, was my nemesis for sure, because I remember that on my attempt in 710, I saw this extremely dense passage come up on screen, and I think I almost froze when I saw that. So I would say to overcome, and what I did to overcome was that. So personally, I was not a very ardent reader, right? And I felt that was one of the weakness. And to improve that, I also recommended to a lot of my students is that start reading for 10 minutes every day. And by reading, I mean not necessarily fiction, but for example, subscribing to a journal like, let's say, the Wall Street Journal, which has, I think, a subscription for $1 for 8 weeks, and read one article every day at least with understanding. So it can be, and try to challenge yourself with topics you don't like. So for example, if you are from the technology background, I would urge you to read topics about science, about bioscience, or about finance, or something which is not related to your field, directly related to your field. And that is how you challenge yourself and train your mind. And that helped me a lot because I was doing it on a regular basis. And it just didn't help me for reading comprehension, but also I started noticing the structure of sentences even more when I was reading such good sources like Wall Street Journal or The Economist. So I would say you have to force your mind to start reading difficult stuff so that you're not stumped on the exam.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we want to move to your application process because you got admitted in HBS. So we want to know, what was your application strategy?
Sure. So just to give a little bit of a background before my application strategy was, I faced a lot of criticism during my prep that you are a candidate who's from a general IT male candidate, which is the most competitive bucket probably out there, who's applying for Harvard Business School. I faced a scenario where no consultant wanted to work with me for Harvard Business School. They said, we'll work with you, but not for Harvard Business School. So for me, that was an initial challenge in my application journey, and which is why I applied to, Harvard was my first choice, but I didn't apply it in round one because my self-confidence took a hit because nobody wanted to work with me. So I applied to my let's say second set of preferred schools in round one, and it was in round two that I applied for HBS. And my application strategy was, I wanted to have a second pair of eyes look at my work. So I also partnered with different consultants, took a lot of free calls, like the half-an-hour free calls with different consultants to see and find a fit. But ultimately, I think it was a mix. I worked with a consultant, I worked with Admissions Gateway, and I also did a lot of stuff myself. So it was more like a mix and match from both these sources.
Okay. So how much time did you spend on your first application?
I think first application was definitely the longest. And, when I was starting out, I felt, oh, the GMAT was the biggest challenge. It's done now. It's going to be a smooth ride for the application. But I was completely wrong, because this application journey in itself was really a long one as well. And the first school which I applied to also, I've spent, if I'm more than 1 month, 1 week, I would say more than a month for sure on my first school, just thinking about what I want to write in the essays, or, I can also specifically talk about how I went about it. Like, for example, which parts I worked on first and which parts I worked on later. But overall, I spent 1 month, 5 weeks, I would say, on my first application. It was a school which I wrote the essays for, but I didn't apply to. So I had written the essays for Kellogg. That was the first school I was, but I didn't end up submitting my application because I kept it for the next year, simply because I decided that that's a school I may not want to go to at a later point, right? But yes, that's a different story. But but 5 weeks to answer your question.
5 weeks, right. So what was the part that took the longest?
I think the part that took the longest for me was the introspection piece, where we had to think about what I want to write in my essays, right? Because for the other stuff, it was like, for the resume, it was more or less the facts. For the LOR, I was not supposed to do anything much there. But for the essays, like thinking about what are the stories that differentiate me, or what are the things which are school values, how do I match those? Like, a school values particular things, and you have certain stories. So how do you pick your best stories to match the school's values, and then also write a compelling narrative around the same, right? So I think here's where the consultants' eyes are really helpful, because they have seen a lot of students in the past, and I think that was a good part where I would appreciate a consultant's help, because it's really personalized to you. So I think I would say that this was something which was really the longest part in getting those stories. What are the top 5 stories, let's say, I want to talk about?
Right. These are the whys, right? Why you're doing the why applying?
Exactly. Like, why do you want it's like asking whys multiple times, like till you actually get to the core. And I remember doing multiple iterations on my own essay. Like, I would ask somebody to keep asking me why till I actually found that why, and then I would add that why to my essay. why did you do this? Why did you, for example, choose to work in Malaysia as your first job? Why did you go to triple IT as your undergrad? I mean, all these questions, when you start thinking about them and writing them down, I think it was really quite a long process of introspection and a lot of learning for me as well.
So with that, we have an interesting question from Molly. What are the two predominant stories of you that you think match with HBS and he felt differentiated from everyone else?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm thinking
Yeah.
which are the two stories that I don't know which are the stories that matched with HBS, because I mean HBS looks at it's a very holistic application. I just don't say it for the sake of it, but actually HBS looks at different facets. But I just talked about, I think I talked a lot of the impact that I had at work, right? And I talked about how I built one of the first products of AI in my company, and how was that journey, and why I took that journey, for example, right? So I talked about that, my rationale, and how it was initially very hard for me to, move out of my country, join a new, like work in a new country, and try to convince the CEO for investing in a new product, for example. So I talked about that journey and how I overcame the obstacles there, and then eventually how that product which I built failed, and then how I started on a new journey. So it was, I talked about that in my essay. I think that was one of the strongest stories, I think, which could have clicked, but I don't. You can never say for sure what clicked in your application. It's really, honestly, a black box. But I can just share this story, which I hope that answers your question, Molly.
Yeah. There is another one here about essays. So, did you write your own application, or did you use any external help? I think. Did you use any external help, and especially in terms of essays? So I guess you can mention the consultants, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I worked with Admissions Gateway in my application, but I also worked with a lot of others because I was quite active on GMAT Club. So I got like these free consultations because I had accumulated some kudos points. So I would say I think I spoke to Square One Prep as well for a while, and then I had a few calls with Amarecia Consulting. So all in all, I spoke to a few people. Yes, but of course, I wrote my own essays. It's unethical to ask for help to write essays on your behalf. And also you have to also write your post-interview reflection after your Harvard interview. So, and you have 24 hours for that. So I would highly discourage people from asking others to write your essays. So I, of course, wrote my own application, but I had a consultant to, guide me in terms of what stories to pick, for example. I think that's where a consultant's role comes in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. So what are the components that you reused in all your applications? And would you mind telling us, the other applications that you have?
Yeah, sure. So I think number one thing, if you're going to start working on your application, I think you should start with your resume, right? It's first of all, you need to, it's something which should be consistent across all applications. So you just work once on it and you have it. And you're also clear in your head that these are the things that I want the admission committee to know. So the resume is the number one thing which can be recycled. The other thing I think you can have, which you can recycle, are your, let's say, the LOR stories, right? So when you reach out to your recommender, you'll have an email that you can tell them, okay, here are a few things I would want you to talk about. And those things I think are more or less consistent across recommenders, right? For these schools. So you'll mostly pick the same two recommenders for all the schools, except maybe MIT, which has only one letter of recommendation. But I would say the stories there can essentially stay the same. And I'm just thinking of what are the other things which you can be reused. I would have a tip here. I think somebody should start with the Stanford application, because the application really brings out the right stories. So it talks about your, I would say some things which can be recycled are your strength story, like what's, let's say, one of your biggest strengths you want to talk about, a failure story, which is like something which you failed at, something where you couldn't convince somebody, and 6 mini stories, let's say, where you did something or you helped someone. So I think these are a few things which can be, let's say, fit into the essays of different schools. But again, you have to tailor them to the school by looking at what the school values and adding flavor, removing flavor accordingly. But more or less, you should have these, let's say, 8 tools in your hand, always ready.
Right, and as you mentioned, tailoring to the different schools, right? What resources did you use to actually tailor your application to know the values of the different schools?
Sure. I think the best way is to visit the website of the school. They have so many resources out there in terms of what are the offerings. Each school is structured differently. They have, like, for example, at HBS you have a required curriculum and then an extra and the EC year the next year, so where you can choose your elective. So it's very specific to the school, and I would highly urge that whichever school you're applying to, maintain an Excel sheet and write down all the facts that interest you. So for example, if you are looking to let's say you're a finance, you want to pursue finance post MBA, go to the website of the school and see not just the courses which they have, which is just one dimension, but also the other things. So what are the clubs that school has, what are the conferences that school does, who have the past speakers been, and do that research and put them down together in the Excel. That's something you can already start doing, because these are really good tips, especially for essays where they ask you, why do you want to come to Stanford, why do you think Columbia is a good fit for you. So I think these are really some stuff which can go in, and the website is the number one resource. Second tip I would have is talk to the students at these schools, right? Especially, I think it's a good time to get a premium version of LinkedIn, especially when you're applying, so you can message the current students and ask them that, students are really very helpful to, so when you reach out to them and ask them about what's the culture of the school like, or what are the classes you took. I think students are really helpful. In fact, some schools also have ambassadors, like student ambassadors, who are designated to help you, and you can also email them. So I think that's a pretty good way to collect material in terms of let's say content for your essays.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, you made an Excel sheet of all the schools and the different facts that you know about these
Yes,
schools, and that's
yes.
how you tailored your application. Okay.
Yes, I did that as well, because I think there was this MBA Spotlight, MBA Spotlight series, and I would attend the school and look at the things the admission officers talk about and make a note of subtle hints they would drop in. Like, for example, let's say there's a new building coming up, the Tangent Hall is coming up in Wharton, for example, right? Now that's something I would like to use in my essay, because that shows I've done my research on the school. Or for example, it can be anything which you pick up from these and then make a list of all of these together and then use them in the essays of the particular school. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
We got cut off somehow.
Sorry for that. Did you get my last answer? Was my last answer visible on was audible on the which I just spoke about, or should I repeat it?
Okay. Yeah, actually, could you repeat the last statement, because I think I lost you there.
Yeah, I was just saying that, for example, it's good to attend the webinars hosted by the specific schools, Spotlight. Because like the GMAT Spotlight, which I talked about, and get some insights. For example, I remember I was applying to Wharton, and I knew that the Tangent Hall is coming up then, and that's something I wrote a story about in my essay. So that's something you can always use and tailor your essays to those schools.
Okay, that's great. How about your target programs? Do you apply them? Do you apply to them first, or do you apply to them last?
So what's
the strategy there?
So the strategy for me, I mean, if I was working on my own and it was not with a consultant, I would have really applied to my number one choice in round one itself. But because I worked with my consultant, the strategy we came up together was to apply to, let's say, schools which are more reachable and not super far, super reach schools. So let's say a mid-range of schools in round one, and based on the results of round one, whether you get into those schools or not, let's say also test the waters. You can then apply to the schools which are above those schools, or if you don't make it to any of those schools, apply to the lower ranked schools. So you are having you're going somewhere, right? So that was a strategy that I used, and I think it helped to that I applied to Harvard last, because I knew my strongest stories then, and I didn't have to spend much time because I spent all the time in introspecting for the other schools. So all this it's like a network effect. It helps if you have already spent time analyzing the other schools' essays. You can actually use them, and what things matter the most to you and what things you want to talk about, they will be reflected. It's much easier to write down the applications for the other schools after the first school is done.
Okay. So in terms of letter of recommendation, what's your advice? Like, who are the best people to reach out to?
So I would say, okay, this opinion also may be a little bit unpopular, but I think the prestige of the person who's writing your LOR does matter, right? Like if that person, for example, is the CEO or a CTO, it really helps. But the caveat there is you should have worked with that person directly. So the number one tip would be pick the person who knows you the best, and the most obvious choice more often than not is your direct supervisor, right? Go with that person. He or she definitely knows you more than anybody else. And depending on the school you're applying to, you can pick somebody where you, for example, volunteered with. That could be to just show some diversity, that one supervisor at work, and let's say one supervisor at an NGO you were volunteering at, for example. But always pick people who work directly with you, and if they have fancy titles, it helps. Like, I mean, then they know, okay, this person is the founder of a startup, this person is the CEO of this company, or a CXO, CPO. I think it helps when you have it just adds credibility.
Yeah, that's true. Any tips for reapplicants? Do you have any tips or strategies?
So I was on the verge of being a reapplicant if I didn't make it to Harvard. So I didn't actually explore the reapplication cycle much, but I know that you have to write additional essays for some schools when you're reapplying. But I was going to reapply if I had to. I would have reapplied to Wharton, and I know that they have a slot on their website where you can talk to admission officers, right? So they won't give you specific feedback to your application, but if you're lucky and there's nobody else in the call that day, it's just you and the admissions advisor, and that happened actually with me. So I would just ask them, what are the things I could talk about, or it was a really insightful session in terms of I just pitched my profile and said, okay, this may be the reasons why, why don't we focus on these areas. So I think that's something which I would recommend. But the most important factor for a reapplicant is going to be what has changed during the time they applied to now. Like in those, let's say,
Yeah.
6 months, what has happened? Have you got a new promotion? Have you found a new company? And I think you should focus on those stories then, because they could tilt the decision in your favor.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that. So we move on to resources that you use for your research. How did you research or shortlist the schools that you actually applied to?
Sure. So for me, the number one thing was the culture of the school, and the only way I could get a feeling of what the culture is was to talk to people. I just would reach out to the people on LinkedIn, and simply based on number of replies I would get back from the school, I could gauge how open a school is and how closed a school is. Right. So
Right.
these are already some intuition you'll start getting about the school. That's number one. Number two is about when you talk to the people from that school, do you feel good? Like, do you want to see that person as your classmate? Yes or no, right? I think that's a very big factor, because you're going to be spending 2 years of your life in that campus, with those people. So that's something which I would look forward to. And if I really enjoyed a conversation with a current student, I knew that this is a place I want to be. And based on that, I decided a few schools I wanted to apply to, and a few schools which I felt were not the right fit for me. I would say rankings are more or less irrelevant, because, well, they are, everybody has their different sets of rankings, and it's more like a numbers game. It depends on what parameters you're looking. I didn't look much into the rankings myself. I just applied to schools where I felt that I can spend 2 years here and I will learn a lot. So that was the number one thing. But in general, yes, I was of course looking at the M7 schools, like in general. I mean, they can vary in the ranking.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't matter much. But I was looking at, let's say, the top 7 to top 10 schools in the US.
Okay. And then you use LinkedIn Premium basically to search for these people and then talk to their alumni and
Yeah.
students.
Yeah, I think one helpful tip there also would be to see the industry you are in. And then I think LinkedIn has superb filters where you can actually choose, for example, alumni who were from your school and, let's say, had similar work experience like yours. For example, they also worked in marketing, for example, and then they joined Kellogg, for example, right? So try to find such people on via LinkedIn search and reach out to them and ask them how was their journey and how do they feel at school. I think that's a very helpful way to connect with the right people. And also, because you share a lot of common things with them, it's also easier to establish a connect, right? They would most probably reply to your message. So I think that's a good way to network with the current students.
So what did you think
Sorry, what? I didn't get your question, Jem. Sorry.
So one of the questions here is that, what do you think was the potential red flag in all of the applications that you did? If you think
In what was the potential red flag in my application?
yes,
I think.
the different aspects that you look at.
Yeah, just I would say that not a red flag, but I'll talk about a few negatives in my application, right? So I didn't go to an IIT or a super elite institution, right? So that's not a red flag, but I mean, top schools really know what IITs are, and they kind of prefer students. I didn't go to a top university. In fact, the college I attended, I was the first batch, so it didn't even have any alum base. So that was one. I also didn't work for a blue chip employer, so I didn't have like I didn't work for a Fortune 500 firm, and I think these two were, let's say, the things which were not in my favor, I would say. But I wouldn't say they were potentially like red flags, but this was something that was not ideal, I would say. That would put me in a bit of a more disadvantage, given the fact I was also already in the competitive bucket of Indian IT male. So these things didn't help.
So how did you tackle that, or how do you? Because I guess in the whole application process, there are different aspects that you look at, right? Or the admissions team look at. So how do you balance those that are potentially?
Yeah. So I mean, so there are few things which, like, if for example, there are certain red flags which you cannot change, right? So for example, the undergrad institution you went to, you cannot change that. Your undergrad GPA, you cannot change that. But I would say you can change, for example, a GMAT score. So if you have a low GMAT, right, I would really spend the time to retake it. Or for example, if you have a shortcoming in your application, I would 100% use the optional essay to talk about it, right? It's important to give the admissions committee as much background as you can in that limited space. And I think optional essay is a great place to talk about why, for example, you didn't work for a top employer or anything of those sorts. I think that's I would use the option essay to talk about either a low score on in the undergrad, or for example, not being able to work for a blue chip employer or whatever. I think that's a good place there. What would you do differently if you had to apply again? Okay. What would I do differently? I would say that I think I would really only apply to the schools that or even write the essays for which I really want to go and get an admit to. So in this case, I really wrote my essays for like 7 to 8 schools, but I think in the end there were only like 3 schools which I was happy to go to. So I would just really narrow down to the schools I really want to go to and apply to only those and spend my energy only on, let's say, those 3 schools.
Sounds good. I think Jem is having some internet issues, so I'm going to take over from here on. So Abhijay, and anything else that you want to talk to us about, like your Instagram channel or your YouTube page?
Yes, sure. I mean, I'm happy to help and connect with applicants who are preparing for the GMAT. So I've been tutoring students now for last 5 years and in the GMAT space. I mean, the idea here is not to, so that they're not bogged down by different resources, but put everything together in crisp sessions. So just 1 hour of session of verbal to just look at the way people are thinking and guide them, and then complete the verbal section, for example, end to end in just 10 to 15 sessions, and then similarly for quant. So that's an initiative I've started. If you're interested, you can have a look at my Instagram page and feel free to message me there. Also, another initiative which I'm looking to start is a YouTube channel for all this advice, right? So there was a question like, what are the few things which you would do differently? And there my answer would be, I feel in an entirety, the admissions consultant is not all that helpful. Any admissions consultant, not just the one I work with, but I feel 80% of the advice is quite generic, right? It's specific to the school, and only the 20% is very specific to you, like for example, choosing the stories. And during this journey, like I started preparing for the GMAT. I mean, I took my GMAT 2016, And I felt that there were a lot of decisions which I had to take on my own, and I did not have any guidance in terms of what could be the right career moves for me. So I'm talking to a few HBS folks, and we plan to have a channel where I would invite certain people who have got the admits to who are going to a top MBA program, and we'd like to share, let's say, for example, what are the career decisions we took, what are the stories we talked about in the essay, what worked for us, and in general some MBA tips on how do you tackle the GMAT versus when should you ask a recommender, how all different facets which go in this application. So it's called Beyond Biz. I think there's the link in the description, so feel free to subscribe to that channel, and I'll be uploading videos on that on very specific tips. So they're going to be really short videos, but just very actionable tips to help everybody out. I think that is something which would have helped me if I was starting on this application or MBA journey.
Sounds good. I think my next question is about, let's see, what are you looking to get out of the school that you're planning to attend? I think most probably it's going to be HBS. Did you make a decision?
Yes, I'm attending the Harvard Business School. I'm starting in fall. I've already paid my fees, so I'm not going to be changing my mind now. Uh, what do I look to get out of the school? I think I'm really looking forward to learn a lot of things which I don't know. For example, my background has mainly been in the technology side as a product manager, and I'm looking to really learn different things like finance, marketing, and then at the end of the first year maybe decide which path I want to pursue. But mostly I'm going to go towards product management. I want to continue in the field, but I want to have a broader horizon. So that's what I'm looking for. But the main thing I'm looking forward to is the people out there, right? And that's what I also want to do through my channel, which I'm starting. I want to share the social capital of HBS with all of you, so that because I went to an undergrad which was not the most elite, and I never had such a network. I was in the first batch of my program, like I mentioned, and there's hardly any alumni base. But with Harvard, we have 87,000 alumni, and I feel that such guidance and such knowledge which is present there can also be shared with the others. So that's the aim of the channel, and with that, I want to share the stories of the people who are attending HBS, what they're doing post HBS, and probably help some of you make the decisions. But the to answer your question, like in summary, I'm really looking forward to the people at HBS. Right, they are what like form the experience, and I look forward to learning from them, exchanging ideas, and let's see what happens after 2 years. I can see a few questions. So Nikhil, are you there? I can see a few questions, so I can take those. How are you managing the fees of HBS? So I have received a portion of scholarship from HBS, so I'll be financing the fees, one part through the scholarship, and the second part I'm taking a loan. So there's the Harvard Credit Union, which is giving a loan at around 4.5% interest rate. So I'll be managing the fees through the scholarship and loan together.
Sounds good. Thank you for answering that. I think I see a question about what is MBA Spotlight. MBA Spotlight is an event where all of the business schools come over to GMAT Club and then have like personalized sessions with all of the interested or prospective applicants. Abhijay, did you have an experience attending MBA Spotlight? Can you tell us what was your experience like, and what did you take away from those series?
I think though that's a great place to sign up for, because you have the representatives of the school one-to-one to talk to, right? You can ask your questions there, anything you're potentially concerned about, like how do I, for example, what's something new that's happening at school, or anything you'd like to know about the school, anything you're not sure about, just feel free to join the sessions, learn about the school. In fact, it's a great place for you to get some content for your essays, because you can see what is the school talking about, which direction the school is moving in, and maybe you want to cater your stories to that direction. So definitely attend the Spotlight, because it's the most recent update you have about that school, right? So don't miss the chance, just sign up for it. And you can also meet potentially students there and start making the connections. So definitely, it was a great experience for me. I think I attended Spotlight for 2 years. The year I was not even applying to, I was just curious to see how these how the conversations happen there. And I think I learned a lot from that, especially by signing up the schools I was interested to go to.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I think for those who are interested, there is a link that is posted in the YouTube comments. You can just sign up using that. The spotlight is going to happen June 13th and 14th. So that's going to be Monday and Tuesday next week. There are a lot of schools that have already signed up, and then you can also sign up for some of those Zoom sessions. Sounds good. Let's see. When did you start process for your application, starting with the GMAT, then writing your essays? The question is like, how long before the deadlines did you actually start
Okay,
writing
yeah.
GMAT and then applications?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the number one tip, I think it's also a very common tip, is to get done with the GMAT early. So I had like my GMAT ready 1 year before the application cycle, but I started writing my essays only around, I would say, around the round one deadline that typically is first week of September. So I started writing my essays around June. So giving myself 2.5 months, because sometimes these essays can take long. So you keep like 2.5 months or so for just changing the essays, working on the drafts, finalizing your resume, talking to the LOR. I think that's a good enough time. But the research, if you can do earlier, I mean, there's nobody stopping you from starting early. It's great if you can already do your research and keep your facts ready about the school. That would really help.
Sounds good. I think my next question is about the HBS interviews. Can you tell us a little bit more about how did you prepare for the interviews? What kind of resources did you use, and how was the actual interview experience like? And I know HBS does this like post-interview reflection. How did you go about that?
Yeah, sure, sure. So I think once you have an interview invite from HBS, the biggest hurdle is crossed, right? But then your chances are on that one interview. And for me, it was just the only interview I had. So I had my GMAT 760, but as I said in the description, I was waitlisted at MIT and rejected from Wharton. So I had only one shot, and which was Harvard. So I didn't want to take any chance with it. And I actually worked with a professional to have my interview conducted. I think it was a mock on GMAT Club itself. So Maria interviewed me live on GMAT Club actually, just 1 month back or so, 2 months back. And personally, I took a lot of buddy mocks. So the good tip there would be to find again, use GMAT Club, find a buddy where you have both been invited to the interview, and interview each other. And there's also specific process of interviewing. I would say have an Excel sheet where you time each other, because the Harvard interview is really fast paced. In my interview, I had about 25 questions asked in like 30 minutes. And it's not a very pressure interview, but the questions move fast, and one needs to be very, brevity is considered very important. So you have to be to the point. And I would just say do a lot of buddy mocks. And also I would say hire people who are at HBS, or who have gone to the school, or have a lot of experience in admissions consultancy, because that one interview, they actually would ask you the right questions and try to find out the pitfalls, which is very important for the Harvard interview. Harvard interview it really depends on the interviewer again, but you have to be, I can talk a lot about it, like in terms of the entire preparation, but that's for a separate conversation, I think. But in general, the tip would be to have a buddy to talk to, and also get some professional consultancy just for the mock, not for the entire application, maybe, but just somebody who can take the mock, sit, introspect your application and ask you questions.
Sounds great. Thanks for sharing that. Can you tell us a little bit about like post-interview reflection? I think there is a 24-hour time limit, right?
Yes, definitely. So what I knew from post-interview reflection is, after you have interviewed at Harvard, you have 24 hours to submit about how do you think the conversation went. And it's a great place to talk about things, let's say you couldn't highlight. So for example, you had your interview, and let's say it was all about one aspect. Let's say you just talked about a firm you started, but your previous experiences were missed, and you feel that they could add value. That's a great place to talk about it. Okay, I wish if we had more time, I would have spoken about this. But in general, it's just they want to see how you reflect on things, right? That's post-interview reflection. So how was that? How was the 30 minutes which went by? Did you learn something? Did you feel? I mean, just it's about just how the discussion flowed, what you felt about it, and just thanking your interviewer. It's not another essay. It's not like you have to write now another 1,000 words or something in describing X, Y, Z. It's a very to the point, concise, more like a thank you note and a reflective note in terms of, I'd love talking to you on these topics. And I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think interview is the bigger portion to worry about, but you have to write this down within 24 hours. So there's a bit of a pressure there.
Sounds good. Thanks for sharing that. I see a common, very interesting one. GMAT Club is only for GMAT training, right? No, it is not. GMAT Prep is only part of what we do. We also do a lot more with admissions. So it's a website that can help you along the process throughout your MBA application cycle, right from starting from GMAT Prep till you get your admission and joining the business school. We can help you all the way. So check out gmatclub.com. What else? I see one interesting thing. Abhijay, do you find any of the M7 taking experienced and aged candidates above 15 years of work experience? What do you think about that?
I would say people who are 15 years of work ex or more, you can always go to the site of the school and see the average range, right? Now it's an average. So average would be maybe 5 to 7 years. But of course, it's an average. So there are people on both sides, the people below 5 and the people after more than 10 years of age. But somebody who's having 15 years of work ex, I'd recommend you also check out the executive MBA programs, because you'll find people in the similar age group, and maybe that's where you want to go. So feel free to apply to both, but I feel an executive MBA would be a better fit given you have so much work experience, because the job opportunities also would be in line with the people from 15 years of work experience. Because at an M7 where the work average is 5 to 7 years, the opportunities for somebody with 15 years of work ex would be not as many as there would be for somebody who's let's say 5 years having a work ex of 5 years. So an executive MBA would be a good place to explore for the same school. I think all the top schools have an executive MBA program.
Sounds great. I see some of the new questions about your GMAT prep and resources. We have covered that during the beginning of the session. So please feel free to go ahead and watch the session again. It will be available on YouTube all the time. But I think that's mostly it for the session. Thanks a lot, Abhijay, for hopping on to this session and then sharing all of your experiences and learnings. All the best to you at HBS. Again, if you want to talk about your Instagram page or YouTube channel, please go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just wish everybody's applying. Just a tip from my side would be, I did not come from a very privileged background, and I never thought I would make it to Harvard. People around me told me that, you are not meant to go to Harvard. And people said, we won't work with you for Harvard. So there are always going to be people who are going to discourage you from applying. I would say, don't listen to them and take your shot. Like, believe in yourself. There will be a few people, your closest buddies, your family, who believe in you. Mine did. And I think you just need one person to believe in you, and that could be just you. So take the shot. If you're interested, I can help you in your GMAT prep. You can check out my channel, GMAT with Abhijay, and also you can subscribe to Beyond Biz, where I'm going to be inviting a few speakers and sharing all the tips which I have in short video format, so that you can prepare well for your journey, because I really wish I had got those tips. So still, just be tuned for that. It'll be coming up very soon. So that's it from my side, Nikhil. Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful chatting to you all. I'm always reachable on the different links which you have shared. So just reach out to me anywhere, and happy to have a chat regarding anything on your GMAT journey.
Sounds great. Again, just want to clarify, all the links to Abhijay's Instagram and YouTube channels are in the YouTube video description. You can find them over there. I just want to say one final thing. We have an MBA Spotlight coming up next week. Again, a lot of the top 20, 30 business schools are coming and doing Zoom sessions with us. You can register using the link that I shared over the YouTube comments. Again, it's happening June 13th and 14th. So that will be Monday and Tuesday next week. I think that's mostly it for the session. Thanks a lot, Abhijay, for coming over here and sharing your experiences. All the best at HBS, and let us know, or feel free to reach out in case you need anything else.
Perfect. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks for hosting.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.